The old motel sign buzzed and flickered in the darkness, casting an eerie red glow over the empty parking lot. Lisa sat on the concrete steps outside room 12, holding her two children close to her chest. 6-year-old Mia was fast asleep against her shoulder, while 4-year-old Danny played quietly with a small toy car, unaware of how desperate their situation had become. 3 days ago, her husband had packed his bags and driven away without looking back. No goodbye kiss. No promise to call. Just the sound of his truck engine fading into the distance and the crushing weight of abandonment settling over her like a heavy blanket. The motel manager, Mr. Peterson, had been patient at first. He understood that sometimes people fell on hard times, but patience only stretched so far, and 3 unpaid nights was his limit. Earlier that evening, he had knocked on her door with kind but firm words. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but if you can't pay by morning, I'll have to ask you to leave." Lisa reached into her purse for the 100th time that day, counting the crumpled bills and loose change. $23.47. That was all that stood between her family and sleeping in their broken-down car. The old sedan had given up that morning, making strange grinding noises before refusing to start entirely. Even if it worked, where would they go? She thought back to how different her life had been just a week ago. They had their own apartment, modest but clean. Danny had his favorite corner where he built elaborate towers with his blocks, and Mia had a small desk where she practiced writing her letters. Lisa had a job at the local diner, nothing fancy, but it paid the bills and put food on the table. But her husband Tom had secrets. Gambling secrets that grew bigger each month. The rent money disappeared first, then the grocery money, then the car payment. When the landlord came knocking with an eviction notice, Tom made promises he couldn't keep. He swore he would fix everything, that he just needed one more chance. Instead, he took what little money they had left and vanished. Now Lisa found herself in a strange town, hundreds of miles from anyone she knew. Tom had convinced her they needed a fresh start, that moving away from his old gambling buddies would solve everything. She had believed him, trusted him, and followed him here with hope in her heart. The desert wind picked up, carrying sand across the parking lot and making Mia shiver in her thin jacket. Lisa pulled her closer, feeling the little girl's steady breathing against her chest. How could she explain to her children that their daddy wasn't coming back? How could she tell them that tomorrow they might not have a roof over their heads? Danny looked up at her with curious brown eyes. "Mommy, when is Daddy coming home?" The question hit her like a punch to the stomach. She had been asking herself the same thing for 3 days, even though she knew the answer. Tom wasn't coming back. He had made his choice, and it wasn't his family. "I don't know, sweetheart," she whispered, running her fingers through Danny's dark hair. It was the most honest answer she could give. A truck rumbled past on the highway, its headlights sweeping across the motel parking lot before disappearing into the night. Lisa watched it go and wondered about the person driving. Were they heading home to a warm house and a family who loved them? Were they running away from something too? She had tried calling her sister in California, but the phone just rang and rang. Her parents had passed away years ago, and she had lost touch with most of her friends during the years of moving around to accommodate Tom's gambling problems. There was nowhere to turn, no one to call for help. The motel room key felt heavy in her hand. In a few hours, she would have to give it back to Mr. Peterson and face whatever came next. She had no plan, no backup, no safety net. For the first time in her life, she truly understood what it meant to be completely alone. Mia stirred in her sleep, mumbling something about horses and castles. Even in her dreams, she was somewhere better than this concrete parking lot. Lisa kissed the top of her daughter's head, breathing in the sweet scent of her strawberry shampoo. Whatever happened, she would find a way to keep her children safe. She had to. The desert stretched out endlessly beyond the motel, dark and empty under the star-filled sky. Somewhere out there was a future she couldn't imagine, a life she hadn't planned for. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new fears, new impossible decisions. But tonight she held her children close and tried to believe that somehow everything would work out. A coyote howled in the distance, its lonely cry echoing across the desert landscape. Lisa closed her eyes and made a silent promise to her sleeping children. No matter what happened, no matter how hard things became, she would never abandon them the way their father had abandoned her. They were her world now, her only reason to keep fighting. The motel sign continued to buzz and flicker, counting down the hours until morning came and their last safe haven would be taken away. But for now, in this quiet moment under the stars, they were together, and sometimes being together was the only strength a person needed to face an uncertain tomorrow. The first drops of rain began falling just after midnight, heavy and cold against Lisa's skin. She looked up at the dark clouds gathering overhead and felt her heart sink even further, as if their situation wasn't bad enough already. Now they would have to face a desert storm with nowhere to go. Thunder rumbled in the distance, growing louder with each passing minute. Mia woke up with a start, her eyes wide with fear as lightning lit up the sky. "Mommy, I'm scared," she whispered, pressing herself closer to Lisa's side. "It's okay, baby. It's just a little rain," Lisa said, trying to keep her voice calm even as the wind picked up and sent empty bottles rolling across the parking lot. She gathered both children in her arms and hurried toward the small overhang by the motel office, hoping it would provide some shelter. The rain came down harder now, turning the dusty parking lot into a muddy mess. Lisa pressed her back against the wall, using her body to shield her children from the wind and water. Danny started to cry, not understanding why they were outside in the storm instead of safely tucked in their beds. Lisa felt completely helpless. Even if she still had the room key, Mr. Peterson had made it clear that their time was up. She couldn't go back inside without paying, and she certainly couldn't ask him to let them stay out of pity. Her pride was about all she had left, and she wasn't ready to give that up too. A pair of headlights appeared through the rain, moving slowly across the parking lot. Lisa tensed, pulling her children closer. In her experience, nothing good happened to stranded families in the middle of the night. The truck came to a stop near the office, and she watched nervously as the driver's door opened. A tall man stepped out, pulling his cowboy hat low over his face to shield himself from the rain. He wore a thick jacket and work boots, and something about the way he moved suggested he was used to hard work and long days. Lisa held her breath, hoping he wouldn't notice them huddled in the shadows. But he did notice. His eyes met hers across the parking lot, and she saw something unexpected there. Not judgment or suspicion, but concern. He walked toward them slowly, his hands visible and non-threatening. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, raising his voice to be heard over the storm. "Are you folks okay out here?" Lisa lifted her chin, trying to look stronger than she felt. "We're fine, thank you." It was a lie, and they both knew it. Her wet hair was plastered to her head, and her children were shivering despite her attempts to keep them warm. The stranger studied them for a moment, taking in their soaked clothes and scared faces. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the concern in his weathered features. "My name's Jake," he said. "I work at a ranch about 10 miles from here. This storm's getting worse, and it's not safe to be out in it." "We're waiting for someone," Lisa said, the lie coming easier this time. She didn't know why she felt the need to explain herself to this stranger, but something about his gentle tone made her want to trust him. Jake nodded, but his expression suggested he didn't believe her any more than she believed herself. "Well, while you're waiting, would you like to sit in my truck? It's warm and dry and there's room for all three of you." Lisa hesitated. Every instinct told her to be careful, to protect her children from strangers who appeared out of nowhere in the middle of storms. But those same children were getting colder and more frightened with each passing minute. "Please, Mommy," Mia whispered. "I'm cold." Danny nodded, his teeth chattering as another gust of wind sent rain swirling around them. Lisa looked at Jake again, searching his face for any sign of danger. Instead, she saw something that reminded her of her own father. Steady, reliable, safe. "Okay," she said finally, "just until the storm passes." Jake smiled for the first time, a warm expression that transformed his entire face. "Good choice. Come on, let's get you folks somewhere dry." He led them to his truck, a sturdy vehicle that smelled like leather and coffee. The heater was running, filling the cab with blessed warmth. Lisa helped her children into the back seat while Jake climbed behind the wheel. "There's a thermos of hot coffee in the glove compartment," he said, settling back in his seat. "And I think I've got some crackers somewhere if the kids are hungry." Lisa wanted to refuse, to maintain some shred of independence, but Danny's stomach chose that moment to growl loudly. She accepted the coffee gratefully, wrapping her cold fingers around the warm cup. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You didn't have to stop." Jake shrugged, adjusting his rearview mirror so he could see the children. "My mama always said you help people when they need it." No questions asked, no strings attached. Just help because it's the right thing to do. As the storm raged outside, Lisa found herself relaxing for the first time in days. The children fell asleep in the warm truck, finally safe and comfortable. Jake didn't ask any questions about why they were alone at a desert motel in the middle of the night. He just sat quietly, occasionally checking to make sure they were okay. "I don't know how to repay you for this," Lisa said after a while. Jake looked at her in the dim light from the dashboard. "You don't need to repay anything. Sometimes we all need a little help getting through the storm." Something about the way he said it made Lisa think he wasn't just talking about the weather. For the first time in 3 days, she felt a tiny spark of hope. Maybe there were still good people in the world. Maybe she and her children weren't as alone as she thought. The rain continued to fall, but inside the truck they were safe and warm. And for now, that was enough. The storm finally passed just as the sun began to rise, painting the desert sky in shades of pink and gold. Lisa woke up to find herself curled in the passenger seat of Jake's truck, a warm blanket tucked around her shoulders. Her children were still sleeping peacefully in the back, looking more relaxed than they had in weeks. Jake was outside, checking something under the hood of her broken-down car. His hat was pushed back and she could see him frowning at whatever he found there. When he noticed she was awake, he walked back to the truck and tapped gently on the window. "Good morning," he said as she rolled it down. "I'm afraid I've got some bad news about your car. Looks like the engine's pretty well shot. It's going to need more work than most folks can afford." Lisa felt her heart sink. Without the car, they were truly stranded. Even if she could scrape together enough money for a motel room, how would they get anywhere? How would she find work or get the children to school when they finally settled somewhere? "I see," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. She didn't want to break down in front of this kind stranger who had already done so much for them. Jake seemed to sense her distress. "Listen, I've got an idea, but I want you to hear me out before you say no." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "The ranch where I work belongs to a woman named Betty. She's been looking for someone to help with the books and maybe watch her grandkids when they visit for the summer. There's a small cabin on the property that's been empty for months." Lisa stared at him, not sure she had heard correctly. "You're offering me a job? You don't even know me. I know you've been sitting in a parking lot all night protecting your children from a storm," Jake said simply. "I know you turned down help at first because you didn't want to be a burden on anyone. And I know those kids of yours are lucky to have a mama who cares about them that much." In the back seat, Mia stirred and opened her eyes. She looked around the truck in confusion for a moment before remembering where they were. "Mommy, are we going home now?" The question broke Lisa's heart. They didn't have a home to go to. But maybe, just maybe, this stranger was offering them a chance to find one. What kind of work would it be exactly? Lisa asked, trying to sound practical instead of desperate. "Betty runs a small ranch. Nothing fancy, just some cattle and horses. She's getting older, and her arthritis makes it hard for her to keep up with the paperwork. Bills, schedules, that sort of thing. She's also got 3 grandchildren who spend their summers with her, and she could use an extra pair of hands keeping them out of trouble." Lisa thought about it while Danny woke up and started asking for breakfast. She had worked as a bookkeeper before, back when she was single and living in Phoenix. It wasn't exciting work, but she had been good at it, and watching children was something she knew how to do. "What's the catch?" she asked. "There was always a catch," Jake smiled. "No catch. Betty's just a lonely widow who likes having people around. The cabin's small but clean, and it comes with the job. You'd have your own space, your own kitchen. The kids could have a real yard to play in instead of motel parking lots." As if on cue, Mia pressed her face against the window and pointed excitedly at something outside. "Mommy, look, horses." Lisa followed her daughter's gaze and saw 2 beautiful horses grazing in a field beyond the highway. Their coats gleamed in the morning sunlight, and they moved with a grace that took her breath away. When was the last time her children had seen anything so beautiful? Would we really be safe there? Lisa asked quietly. Jake's expression grew serious. "Betty's place is like a sanctuary. She's taken in more strays than I can count, both human and animal. Nobody bothers folks who don't want to be bothered." There was something in his tone that made Lisa think he was speaking from personal experience. Maybe he had been a stray once too. "I don't know," she said, even though her heart was already saying yes. "It sounds too good to be true." "Sometimes good things happen to good people," Jake said. "Not often enough, but sometimes." Danny tugged on Lisa's sleeve. "Mommy, I'm hungry, and I need to use the bathroom." Lisa looked at her son's trusting face and made a decision that would change all their lives. "Okay," she said to Jake, "we'll try it. But if it doesn't work out, if we're not what she's looking for, we'll move on. No hard feelings." Jake's whole face lit up with a smile. "Fair enough. Let's go meet Betty." The ranch was exactly 10 miles down a dusty road that wound through hills covered in sagebrush and wildflowers. The house was old but well-maintained, with a wide front porch and flower boxes under every window. There were chickens pecking in the yard, and a lazy dog sleeping in the shade of an oak tree. Betty turned out to be a small, energetic woman in her 70s, with silver hair and eyes that sparkled with intelligence. She took one look at Lisa and the children and announced that they looked like they could use a good breakfast and a hot shower. "Not necessarily in that order. Jake's told me a little about your situation," she said as she bustled around her kitchen, pulling out eggs and bacon. "Don't worry about the details. We all have stories we'd rather not tell. What matters is what comes next." Lisa found herself relaxing in spite of her fears. There was something about Betty that reminded her of her own grandmother, a combination of strength and kindness that made you feel safe just being in the same room. "The cabin's just across the yard," Betty continued. "It's not much, but it's clean and private. There's a good lock on the door and plenty of room for the children to play. If you decide to stay, we can talk about the job details later. Right now, you all just need to rest." As Lisa watched her children eat their first real meal in days, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Maybe they really had found a place where they could start over, where they could build something good from the ashes of their old life. For the first time since Tom drove away, Lisa allowed herself to believe that everything might actually be okay. 3 weeks had passed since Lisa and her children arrived at Sunflower Ranch, and slowly, carefully, they were beginning to build a new life. The small cabin had become a real home, with Mia's drawings taped to the refrigerator and Danny's toy cars lined up on the windowsill. Every morning, Lisa walked across the yard to Betty's house to work on the ranch's finances. She had discovered that Betty was terrible with numbers but excellent with everything else. Bills were scattered across the kitchen table in no particular order. Receipts were stuffed into coffee cans, and the checkbook hadn't been balanced in months. "I've never been good with all those numbers," Betty admitted on Lisa's first day. "My late husband Harold took care of all that business stuff. After he passed, I just tried to keep my head above water." Lisa had rolled up her sleeves and gotten to work. Within a week, she had created a filing system that made sense, set up a budget that would help Betty save money on feed and supplies, and organized all the important papers in labeled folders. For the first time in months, Lisa felt useful, competent, valuable. "You're a godsend," Betty said, watching Lisa update the ledger with neat, careful handwriting. "I can't believe how much clearer everything looks now." In the afternoons, Lisa helped with Betty's 3 grandchildren who visited every few days. 8-year-old Lucy was bossy and smart. 6-year-old Ben was quiet and thoughtful, and 4-year-old Anna was a bundle of energy who never seemed to slow down. At first, Lisa had worried about how Mia and Danny would fit in with Betty's grandkids, but children had a way of working things out on their own. The 5 kids spent their days exploring the ranch, building forts out of hay bales and learning to feed the chickens without getting pecked. Lisa often watched them from the kitchen window, marveling at how quickly her children had adapted to their new surroundings. They laughed more now, played more freely, and seemed to have forgotten the fear that had haunted them during those terrible motel days. Jake stopped by most evenings after finishing his work with the cattle. At first, Lisa had been nervous around him, unsure of his motives for helping them. But as the days passed, she began to understand that Jake was simply a good man who helped people because it was the right thing to do. He taught Danny how to whistle, and showed Mia how to braid the old horse's tail. He never asked Lisa personal questions about her past or pushed her to share more than she was comfortable with. Instead, he brought little gifts for the children, funny stories about his day, and a steady, calming presence that made everyone feel safer. "You're good with them," Lisa said one evening as they watched the children play tag in the yard. Jake had just spent 20 minutes helping Danny learn to throw a baseball, patiently showing him how to position his feet and follow through with his arm. "Kids are easy," Jake said with a shrug. "They don't judge you for your mistakes. They just care whether you're kind to them or not." Lisa studied his profile in the golden evening light. There were laugh lines around his eyes and a scar on his chin that looked like it came from a childhood accident. Everything about him seemed honest and straightforward, so different from the complicated man she had married. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Sure. Why did you help us that night? You could have just driven past the motel and minded your own business." Jake was quiet for a long moment, watching Danny chase the ranch dog around a pile of firewood. "When I was about Danny's age, my dad left us. Just up and disappeared one day when things got tough. My mama did her best, but we ended up homeless for a while, staying in shelters and sleeping in our car." Lisa felt her heart clench with sympathy. No wonder he had recognized their desperation that night. "One day we were at a gas station and my mama was crying because she didn't have enough money for food and gas both. This trucker saw us and bought us groceries without saying a word about it. Just handed my mama 2 bags of food and walked away. I never forgot that." "What happened to your family?" Lisa asked gently. "Mama got back on her feet eventually. Found work, got us a little apartment. We made it through okay. But I always remembered how it felt to be that scared and hungry. I swore that if I ever had the chance to help someone else's kids, I would." Danny ran over to them, out of breath and grinning. "Jake, will you push me on the swing?" "You bet, buddy," Jake said, standing up and ruffling the boy's hair. As he walked toward the old tire swing hanging from the oak tree, Lisa felt something warm and unfamiliar stirring in her chest. It had been so long since she had seen her children completely happy and carefree. And it had been even longer since she had felt this way around a man. Safe. Respected. Valued for who she was rather than criticized for who she wasn't. That night, after the children were asleep, Lisa sat on her small porch and looked up at the stars. The desert sky was clearer than anything she had ever seen in the city, with thousands of tiny lights scattered across the darkness like diamond dust. For the first time since Tom left, she wasn't thinking about what had gone wrong in her marriage or worrying about what would happen tomorrow. Instead, she was thinking about the way Jake's face lit up when Danny finally caught the baseball, and the way Betty hummed while she cooked dinner, and the way her children fell asleep each night without fear or worry. Maybe this was what peace felt like. Maybe this was what home was supposed to be. A shooting star streaked across the sky, and Lisa made a wish she had never dared to make before. She wished for time. Time to heal, time to grow, time to build something lasting and good in this place where strangers had become friends and friends were becoming family. Inside the cabin, Mia called out in her sleep, something about horses and birthday cake. Lisa smiled and went inside to check on her children, feeling grateful for the first time in longer than she could remember. Whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together, surrounded by people who cared about them, and that made all the difference in the world. Lisa was hanging laundry on the line behind the cabin when she heard the familiar rumble of a truck engine coming up the ranch road. She looked up, expecting to see Jake returning from town with supplies, but the vehicle was wrong. This truck was newer, shinier, and moving too fast for the dusty gravel road. Her blood turned to ice when she recognized the driver. Tom stepped out of the truck wearing a clean shirt and new jeans, his hair freshly cut and his smile as charming as ever. He looked around the ranch with the same calculating expression he had worn when sizing up new poker games, taking in the house, the barn, and the general prosperity of the place. "Hello, Lisa," he said, walking toward her with his hands in his pockets like he was just dropping by for a friendly visit. "You've certainly landed in a nice spot." Lisa's hands shook as she dropped the wet towel she had been holding. "What are you doing here, Tom?" "How did you find us?" "I've been looking for my family," he said, his voice smooth and reasonable. "A man has a right to know where his children are, doesn't he?" "You abandoned us," Lisa said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You left us with nothing at a motel in the middle of nowhere." Tom had the grace to look slightly ashamed, but only slightly. "I made some mistakes, baby. I know that. But I've gotten my life together now. I'm clean, I'm sober, and I want my family back." Lisa stared at him, searching his face for any sign of the man she had once loved. He looked healthier than he had in months, well-fed and well-rested. But there was something in his eyes that hadn't changed. A restlessness, a hunger that she recognized all too well. "Where have you been for the past 2 months?" she asked, getting help, going to meetings, finding work. He pulled out his wallet and showed her a roll of bills. "See, I've got money now. Real money. We can get a place of our own, start over somewhere new. Lisa felt sick. She knew that look, that tone of voice. Tom was gambling again and he was winning. For now. But she had learned the hard way that when Tom was winning at cards, he was losing at everything else that mattered. "The children are happy here," she said. "They're safe and settled. I have a good job and we're building a life." "With who?" Tom asked, his smile faltering slightly. "That cowboy I saw in town asking questions about me." Lisa's heart skipped a beat. Jake had been asking about Tom? When? Why hadn't he told her? "I don't know what you're talking about," she lied. Tom laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Come on, Lisa, you think I'm stupid? Small towns are full of gossips. Everyone knows about the pretty widow and her kids living out at Betty Whitman's place. Everyone knows about how close she's gotten to that foreman of hers." "I'm not a widow," Lisa said quietly, "and what I do with my life is none of your business anymore." "It's my business when it involves my children," Tom snapped, his mask of charm slipping for just a moment. "You can't just take them away from their father and play house with some stranger." Before Lisa could respond, she heard the sound of running feet. Mia appeared around the corner of the cabin, her face bright with excitement. "Mommy, Betty says we can help her make cookies for—" She stopped short when she saw Tom, confusion replacing the joy on her small features. "Daddy?" she said uncertainly. Tom's entire demeanor changed instantly. He crouched down to Mia's level, his smile warm and genuine. "Hey there, princess. I've missed you so much." Mia hung back, staying close to Lisa. "Where did you go, Daddy? We waited for you, but you didn't come back." Lisa's heart broke at the innocent question. How could she explain to a 6-year-old that her father had chosen gambling over his family? "Daddy had to go away for a while," Tom said smoothly. "But I'm back now, and I want us to be a family again. Would you like that?" Mia looked at her mother with wide, uncertain eyes. Lisa could see the conflict written across her daughter's face. She loved her father, but she also remembered the fighting, the fear, the nights when he didn't come home. Danny chose that moment to come racing around the cabin, chasing one of the barn cats. He skidded to a stop when he saw Tom, his smile fading into confusion. "Why is Daddy here?" he asked Lisa. "I came to see my boy," Tom said, reaching out to ruffle Danny's hair. But Danny stepped back, moving closer to his mother. "We live here now," Danny said matter-of-factly. "Jake taught me how to throw a baseball and Betty lets me help feed the chickens." "I don't want to leave." Tom's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "You can learn to throw a baseball anywhere, son. And I'm sure there are chickens lots of places." Lisa saw the fear creeping into her children's eyes and felt something fierce and protective rise up in her chest. These were her babies, and she would not let Tom hurt them again. "I think you should leave," she said, moving so that she was between Tom and the children. "I'm not leaving without my family," Tom said, his voice harder now. "I've got rights, Lisa, legal rights. Those are my children, too." "Rights you gave up when you abandoned us," Lisa said, surprised by the strength in her own voice. Tom stepped closer, and for a moment Lisa thought he might grab her arm the way he used to when he was frustrated. But then truck tires crunched on the gravel, and Jake's familiar vehicle pulled into the yard. Jake took one look at the scene and was out of his truck in seconds. Moving with the purposeful stride of a man who meant business, he positioned himself slightly in front of Lisa and the children. Not aggressive, but clearly protective. "Everything okay here?" he asked, his voice calm but his eyes hard. Tom straightened up, trying to look casual. "Just having a family discussion. Nothing that concerns you." "Anything that upsets Lisa and these kids concerns me," Jake said evenly. Tom laughed, but there was an edge to it now. "The hired help thinks he's part of the family." "How touching." Lisa saw Jake's hands clench into fists and quickly stepped forward. "Tom, please, just go. Let us have some peace." "I'm not going anywhere without my children," Tom said. "We're a family, and families belong together." "No," Mia said suddenly, her small voice carrying clearly across the yard. Everyone turned to look at her. "We're not a family anymore. You left us, remember?" The simple honesty of a child's words hit Tom like a physical blow. For a moment, his carefully constructed facade crumbled, and Lisa saw the man she had once known, lost, ashamed, desperate. But then the mask slipped back into place and he was charming Tom again, ready to say whatever it took to get what he wanted. "I'll be back," he said, backing toward his truck. "This isn't over, Lisa. Those are my children and I'm not giving up on them." As his truck disappeared down the road, Lisa sank onto the porch steps, shaking. Jake sat down beside her while the children pressed close, seeking comfort and reassurance. "Are we going to have to go with Daddy?" Mia asked in a small voice. Lisa wrapped both children in her arms, holding them tight. "No, baby. No matter what happens, I won't let anyone take you away from here." But even as she spoke the words, she wondered if she would be able to keep that promise. Tom was right about one thing. He did have legal rights, and if he wanted to fight for custody, she would need more than good intentions to stop him. For the first time since arriving at the ranch, Lisa felt truly afraid. The peace they had built here was fragile, and Tom's return threatened to shatter it completely. But as Jake's steady presence beside her and felt her children's trust in her arms, Lisa made a decision. She had found something worth fighting for here. She had found home, and she wasn't going to give it up without a battle. 2 weeks passed in tense quiet. Lisa found herself constantly looking over her shoulder, jumping at unexpected sounds and checking the locks on the cabin door twice before bed. Tom had called several times, his voice alternating between sweet promises and barely contained threats. He wanted to take the children for a weekend visit. He wanted to discuss their future. He wanted his family back. Lisa had refused every request, but she knew she was only buying time. Tom was getting more persistent, more demanding. It was only a matter of when, not if, he would escalate the situation. The answer came on a Thursday evening just as the sun was setting over the ranch. Lisa was helping Betty prepare dinner, while the children played in the yard. The sound of screeching tires and a slamming car door made them both look up from the vegetables they were chopping. Tom stumbled out of his truck, and even from the kitchen window, Lisa could see that something was very wrong. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair was messy, and he was moving with the unsteady gait of someone who had been drinking. "Oh no," Lisa whispered, her heart sinking. She had seen Tom like this too many times before, drunk, desperate, and unpredictable. "Get the children inside," Betty said sharply, already reaching for the phone. Right now, but it was too late. Tom had spotted Danny playing with his toy cars near the porch and was walking toward him with determined, uneven steps. "Danny boy," he called out, his voice too loud and too cheerful. "Come give your daddy a hug." Danny looked up uncertainly, then backed away as Tom approached. Even at 4 years old, he recognized the signs of his father's drinking. Lisa rushed outside, her maternal instincts overriding her fear. "Tom, you need to leave. Right now." "I came to see my kids," Tom slurred, reaching for Danny. "A man has a right to see his own kids." "Not like this," Lisa said, positioning herself between Tom and Danny. "You're drunk, Tom. You shouldn't be driving. And you certainly shouldn't be around the children." Tom's expression darkened. "Don't tell me what I should or shouldn't do. You're not my boss, Lisa. You're my wife, and these are my children." "I stopped being your wife the day you abandoned us," Lisa said, her voice shaking but determined. "And you lost the right to call them your children when you chose gambling and drinking over their safety." Tom took a step closer, and Lisa caught the smell of whiskey and desperation on his breath. "I've been patient with you, Lisa. I've been nice. But my patience is running out." Mia appeared in the doorway of the house, her face pale with fear. "Mommy?" she called out in a small voice. "It's okay, baby. Go back inside with Betty," Lisa said without taking her eyes off Tom. But Tom had already spotted his daughter. "Mia, come here, princess. Daddy's here to take you home." "This is our home," Mia said, her young voice surprisingly strong. "I don't want to go with you." The rejection hit Tom like a slap. His face twisted with anger and hurt pride. "You've been filling their heads with lies about me," he accused Lisa, "turning my own children against me." "I've never said a word against you to them," Lisa replied truthfully. "They remember, Tom. They remember the fighting, the fear, the nights when you didn't come home. Children don't forget." "Well, they're going to have to learn to forgive," Tom said, lunging forward and grabbing Danny's arm. "Come on, son. We're leaving." Danny started to cry, pulling away from his father's grip. "No, I want to stay here." "Let me go." "You're hurting him," Lisa said, reaching for her son. "Let him go, Tom." "He's my boy," Tom said, tightening his hold on Danny's arm. "And I'm taking him home where he belongs." That's when Jake appeared, moving fast across the yard with the determined stride of someone who meant business. "Take your hands off that child," he said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that made people listen. Tom turned, still holding Danny, his eyes wild with drink and desperation. "This is none of your business, cowboy. This is between me and my family. It became my business when you put your hands on that little boy," Jake said, continuing his steady approach. "Now let him go. Or what?" Tom challenged, pulling Danny closer to his chest. The little boy was crying harder now, scared and confused by the adult conflict swirling around him. "Or I'll make you let him go," Jake said simply. There was something in his tone that must have penetrated even Tom's drunken haze. He looked at Jake's steady approach, at Betty calling someone on the phone from the porch, at Lisa's fierce protective stance, and seemed to realize for the first time that he was outnumbered and outgunned. But instead of backing down, Tom's desperation made him double down on his bad choices. "Fine," he said, hoisting Danny up into his arms. "If that's how you want to play it, I'll take what's mine and go." He started walking toward his truck, carrying a struggling, crying Danny. Lisa ran after them, her heart pounding with terror. "Tom, please. You can't take him. You're drunk, you'll hurt him." "I'm his father," Tom said, fumbling with the truck door while trying to hold on to Danny. "I have every right." That's when Jake caught up with them. Moving with surprising speed for such a big man, he grabbed Tom's wrist and applied pressure to a specific point that made his fingers go numb. Danny slipped from Tom's suddenly limp grasp right into Lisa's waiting arms. "That's enough," Jake said, his voice deadly quiet. "You need to get in your truck and drive away, right now before the sheriff gets here." Tom stared at him, swaying slightly on his feet. For a moment, Lisa thought he might take a swing at Jake. But then he seemed to deflate, the fight going out of him as suddenly as it had appeared. "This isn't over," he said, pointing an unsteady finger at Lisa. "Those are my children, and I'll get them back. You can't hide from me forever." "Yes, she can," Jake said evenly. "And she will. Because men who grab crying children and threaten their mothers don't deserve to call themselves fathers." Tom climbed into his truck, gunning the engine and spinning his tires as he drove away too fast down the ranch road. Lisa stood in the settling dust, holding Danny tight against her chest while Mia pressed against her side. "Is he gone?" Mia whispered. "He's gone, baby," Lisa said, though she knew it wasn't really true. Tom would be back, probably with lawyers and court papers and official demands that she couldn't ignore. Jake put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Betty's called Sheriff Morrison. He's on his way out here to file a report. And tomorrow, we're going to see a lawyer about getting you and the kids some real protection." Lisa looked up at him, seeing the determination in his face and feeling something shift inside her chest. For so long she had been fighting this battle alone, trying to protect her children with nothing but her own strength and stubbornness. But now she wasn't alone anymore. "Thank you," she said, meaning it in ways that went far deeper than just tonight's rescue. Jake smiled. The first smile she had seen from him since Tom appeared on the scene. "That's what families do," he said. "They protect each other." And in that moment, Lisa realized that he was right. They were a family now, not bound by blood or law, but by choice and love and the determination to keep each other safe. Tom could bring lawyers and court orders and legal documents. But he couldn't change the simple truth that Lisa had found her real home here, with people who valued her children's happiness over his parental rights. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And that made all the difference in the world. The courthouse in town was smaller than Lisa had expected, with wooden benches and old-fashioned ceiling fans that creaked as they turned. She sat between Jake and Betty, wearing her best dress and trying not to fidget with the papers in her lap. The lawyer, Mrs. Henderson, had assured her that they had a strong case, but Lisa's stomach was still tied in knots. 3 months had passed since Tom's drunken visit to the ranch. True to his word, he had returned with legal papers demanding visitation rights and threatening to fight for full custody. The court battle had been long and exhausting, full of paperwork and depositions and sleepless nights. But it was finally over. Judge Martinez, a kind-faced woman in her 60s, looked over her glasses at the assembled group. "After reviewing all the evidence in this case," she began, "including the police reports, witness statements, and the children's own testimony, I'm granting Ms. Lisa full custody of Mia and Danny." Lisa felt tears of relief spring to her eyes. Beside her, Betty squeezed her hand while Jake placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "I'm issuing a restraining order against Mr. Tom requiring him to stay at least 100 yards away from Ms. Lisa and the children. Any future contact must go through the court and Ms. Lisa's attorney." Tom, who had been sitting alone on the other side of the courtroom, stood up shakily. He looked older than Lisa remembered, with dark circles under his eyes and the hollow look of someone who had been drinking too much and sleeping too little. "Your Honor," he said, his voice hoarse, "those are my children. I have rights." Judge Martinez looked at him sternly. "Mr. Tom, you forfeited those rights when you abandoned your family at a desert motel with no money and no transportation. You further demonstrated your unfitness as a parent when you attempted to remove your 4-year-old son from a safe environment while under the influence of alcohol." Tom's shoulders sagged in defeat. For a moment, Lisa felt a flicker of sympathy for the man she had once loved. But then she thought about Danny crying in his father's arms and Mia's frightened face, and the sympathy faded. "However," the judge added, "the door is not permanently closed. If you can demonstrate 1 full year of sobriety, steady employment, and completion of a parenting class, you may petition the court for supervised visitation. The children's best interest will always be my primary concern." Tom nodded numbly and shuffled out of the courtroom without another word. Lisa watched him go, feeling a strange mixture of sadness and relief. Outside the courthouse, Mrs. Henderson shook hands with everyone and promised to file all the necessary paperwork. "You should be able to sleep peacefully tonight," she told Lisa. "The restraining order goes into effect immediately." As they walked to Jake's truck, Lisa felt lighter than she had in months. The legal nightmare was over. Her children were safe. They could finally move forward with their lives without looking over their shoulders. "Mama Betty, can we have ice cream to celebrate?" Mia asked, skipping alongside them. "I think that sounds like an excellent idea," Betty said with a smile. "Ice cream for everyone." They went to the little diner on Main Street, the same one where Lisa had eaten her first meal as a free woman 3 months ago. The children chattered excitedly about their plans for the weekend, their fears and worries temporarily forgotten in the excitement of celebration. Later that evening, after the children were asleep, Lisa found herself sitting on the porch of the cabin with Jake. The night was cool and clear, with stars scattered across the sky like scattered sugar on a dark tablecloth. "How are you feeling?" Jake asked. "Free," Lisa said without hesitation. "For the first time in years, I feel completely free." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the ranch. An owl hooted in the distance, and somewhere in the darkness cattle lowed softly to each other. "Lisa," Jake said finally, "there's something I need to tell you." She looked at him, noticing the serious expression on his face. "What is it?" "I've been thinking about this for a while, but I didn't want to say anything until the custody battle was over. I didn't want you to think I was taking advantage of the situation or trying to pressure you when you were vulnerable." Lisa's heart began to beat faster. "Jake, what are you trying to say?" He turned to face her fully, his eyes reflecting the light from the cabin windows. "I'm saying that I love you, Lisa. I love you, and I love Mia and Danny. I want to be part of your family officially and permanently if you'll have me." Lisa stared at him, her mind reeling. She had been so focused on survival, on protecting her children and building a stable life, that she hadn't allowed herself to think about love. But now that Jake had said the words, she realized that love had been growing quietly between them all along. "I love you too," she whispered, amazed by the truth of it. "I think I have for a while now, but I was too scared to admit it." Jake's face broke into the biggest smile she had ever seen from him. "So what do you think? Would you maybe want to make this official? Get married, buy a little house together, give the kids the family they deserve?" Lisa thought about everything they had been through together. Jake had been there for her children's nightmares, their scraped knees, their homework struggles. He had taught Danny to ride a bike and helped Mia learn to read. He had stood between them and danger without hesitation, and he had never once made her feel like a burden or a charity case. "Yes," she said, laughing through happy tears. "Yes, I would like that very much." Jake pulled her into his arms, holding her close as they both cried with joy and relief. They had found each other in the storm, but they had built something lasting in the sunshine that followed. Behind them, the cabin glowed with warm yellow light. Inside, her children slept peacefully in their own beds, safe and loved and home. And for the first time in her adult life, Lisa knew with absolute certainty that everything was going to be all right. The ranch had given them sanctuary when they needed it most. Betty had given them a chance to start over. And Jake had given them something Lisa had thought was lost forever: a real family, built on love and trust and the promise of tomorrow. As they sat together under the star-filled sky, planning their future and dreaming their dreams, Lisa realized that sometimes the most beautiful stories began with the darkest chapters. Her story had started with abandonment and fear, but it was ending with love and hope and the promise of happily ever after, and that made all the struggles worth it. 1 year later, Lisa stood in the same spot where Jake had first found her family on that stormy night at the old motel. But everything else had changed completely. She wore a simple white dress that Betty had helped her pick out, with wildflowers in her hair that Mia had gathered that morning from the ranch meadow. The small wedding ceremony was taking place in Betty's backyard, under the same oak tree where the children had spent countless hours playing and laughing. White ribbons fluttered from the branches, and mason jars filled with sunflowers decorated the tables that Jake had built specially for the occasion. "You look beautiful, Mama," Mia whispered, straightening the small bouquet in Lisa's hands. At 7 years old, she took her job as flower girl very seriously, wearing a pale yellow dress and carrying a basket of rose petals. Danny stood beside Jake at the makeshift altar, proudly holding the rings in a small velvet box. At 5, he was still too young to understand everything that was happening, but he knew it was important and special. He had been practicing walking slowly for weeks, determined not to trip when it was time to bring the rings forward. The guest list was small but perfect. Betty sat in the front row wearing her best Sunday dress and a smile that could have powered the whole ranch. Sheriff Morrison was there with his wife, along with Doc Harrison and several of the neighboring ranchers who had become like extended family over the past year. Mrs. Henderson, the lawyer who had helped them through the custody battle, sat next to the mailman who always stopped to chat with the children when he delivered packages. Even the veterinarian who took care of the ranch animals had come, bringing his wife and twin daughters who were Mia's age. As the simple ceremony began, Lisa looked around at all the faces smiling back at her. A year ago, she had been completely alone with 2 frightened children and no idea how they would survive. Now she was surrounded by a community of people who had chosen to love and support her family. Pastor Williams from the town church kept the ceremony short and sweet, just the way Lisa and Jake had requested. When it came time for the vows, Jake took her hands and looked directly into her eyes. "Lisa," he said, his voice strong and clear, "a year ago you were a stranger in trouble, and I was just a man trying to do the right thing. But you became so much more than someone I helped. You became my best friend, my partner, and the love of my life." He glanced at Mia and Danny, including them in his words. "I promise to love you and your children, to protect you, to support your dreams, and to be the kind of husband and father that you all deserve. In good times and hard times, in sickness and health, I will stand by you always." Lisa felt tears of joy running down her cheeks as she spoke her own vows. "Jake, you saved us that night, but not in the way most people think. You didn't rescue us from the storm. You showed us what real love looks like. You taught my children that they deserve to be treated with kindness and respect. And you taught me that I deserve that too." She squeezed his hands, feeling the calluses from years of honest work. "I promise to love you with all my heart, to support your dreams the way you've supported mine, and to build a home with you that's filled with laughter and love and second chances. You'll never be alone again, and neither will we." When Pastor Williams pronounced them husband and wife, the small crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Jake kissed his new bride while Mia threw rose petals in the air and Danny jumped up and down with excitement. The reception was held right there in the backyard, with Betty's famous fried chicken and homemade apple pie, along with a small wedding cake that Lisa had made herself. There was no fancy band, just Sheriff Morrison playing guitar while his wife sang old country songs that made everyone feel nostalgic and happy. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Lisa found herself dancing with Jake on the grass while their children played with the other kids nearby. The fairy lights that Betty had strung through the trees began to twinkle in the gathering dusk. "So, Mrs. Sullivan," Jake said, spinning her around slowly, "how does it feel to be married?" "It feels like coming home," Lisa said, resting her head against his chest. "Like everything that happened before was just preparing us for this moment." Mia ran up to them, tugging on Lisa's dress. "Mama, can Danny and I sleep in the big house with Mama Betty tonight? She said she'd make us pancakes for breakfast." Lisa laughed, realizing that Betty had probably planned this all along to give the newlyweds some privacy. If Mama Betty doesn't mind having 2 extra helpers in her kitchen, then yes. She said we could help feed the chickens too, Danny added, appearing at his sister's side with his face already sticky from wedding cake. As the children ran off to help Betty clean up the reception dishes, Jake pulled Lisa closer. I have something for you, he said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small wooden box carved with sunflowers and painted with care. I made this for you. It's not much, but it's perfect, Lisa said, opening the box to find a simple gold locket inside. When she opened it, she saw a tiny photo of all 4 of them together at last summer's county fair. When did you have this made? She asked. About 6 months ago, Jake admitted. I've been carrying it around waiting for the right moment. I wanted you to have something that showed we're a family, all of us together. Lisa felt fresh tears starting as Jake fastened the locket around her neck. It settled perfectly in the hollow of her throat, a tangible reminder of the love and commitment they had just made to each other. Later that night, after the guests had gone home and the children were settled at Betty's house, Lisa and Jake sat on their porch swing watching the stars come out. The same stars that had witnessed her darkest moments were now celebrating her brightest. Do you ever think about that night at the motel? Jake asked. Sometimes, Lisa said, but not with sadness anymore. That night was the beginning of everything good in my life. If Tom hadn't left us there, if you hadn't driven past at exactly the right moment, if we hadn't been brave enough to accept help from a stranger, none of this would have happened. Jake was quiet for a moment. I used to think I saved you that night, but now I realize you saved me too. I was just going through the motions of living before you came along. Working, sleeping, working some more. But you and the kids gave me a reason to build something lasting. Lisa looked at the wedding ring on her finger, still amazed that it was real. Mama Betty says that sometimes the best things in life come disguised as disasters. She says we have to go through the storm to appreciate the sunshine. Mama Betty is a wise woman, Jake said, pulling Lisa closer to his side. As they sat together in the peaceful darkness, Lisa reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. A year ago, she had been terrified, alone, and convinced that her life was over. Now she was married to a wonderful man. Her children were happy and thriving, and they had built a home filled with love and laughter. The abandoned woman who had sat in a motel parking lot with nothing but $23 and 2 scared children was gone. In her place was someone stronger, wiser, and infinitely more grateful for the simple gifts of safety, love, and family. Jake had kept his promise from that first night. She was never alone again. But more importantly, she had learned that she was capable of standing on her own, of building something beautiful from the wreckage of her old life. The future stretched out before them, full of possibilities they hadn't dared to dream of before. There would be challenges, certainly. No life was without them, but whatever came next, they would face it together as a family, with love as their foundation and hope as their guide. And that was the most beautiful ending Lisa could have imagined. Not an ending at all, but a beginning. The beginning of the rest of their lives filled with second chances, chosen family, and the kind of love that transforms even the darkest storms into the promise of brighter days ahead.